Okay. So on Tuesday, Christophe introduced the notion of community detection. So you have learned about what is community detection and one particular algorithm called Louvain. And I want to, so just I remind you, Louvain, I think, so he introduced that notion that you first try to move node to try to increase the modularity function. And I think maybe he did not say it, but there is a second step where the first step you move your nodes around and you get a first result like this one. So you have your red and blue and green communities. And then there is a second step where you aggregate that into a network of clusters. So now you have the red node represent all the red node here, the blue one correspond to all the blue one, and the green to all the green ones. And the edge between these nodes correspond to the number of edges going from a green node to a blue node. So you get a weighted network, and then you start again the algorithm from this network now. And so instead of having a probability, instead of having only 0 or 1, if you have an edge between two nodes, you now have the number of edges, and you compare that with the expected number of edges in a random network, in which the degree, so the degree of the red node is the sum of the degree of all the red nodes here. Okay, so you create this aggregated network at a higher level, and then you redo your clustering. So you have actually a kind of a hierarchical structure in which you have the first structure with only 3 communities in that case, and then you have this second structure in which you have blue and blue are put together, so you have only 2 communities, the red one and the blue one, for instance. So it's kind of it's a hierarchy. And then he also mentioned this notion of the resolution limit, which was discussed in a series of articles in the year 2006, 2008. And so before that date, people kind of thought of modularity as the right definition of what are communities, the modularity. And after that, after these papers, people really realized that it was just one definition of what is a good community, and that maybe we needed to have other proposition of other ways of characterizing the network in terms of clusters. So he showed this example. I don't go back to it, just to say that, yeah, if you consider a ring of cliques, the modularity, optimizing the modularity, the solution of optimal modularity will leads to having 2 of those clusters in one community. And clearly, you don't want that. No one wants to say that here you have only these communities composed of 2 clusters. You want each clique to be a one community. So I want to do a parallel to, yes, it's here, okay. Yeah, maybe I will just directly jump to that one. So I want to do a parallel with clustering. So community detection, sometimes we also call it graph clustering. So for those who have done a little bit of machine learning, or just if you have done some analysis of data, you probably learned about clustering in normal data, not in graphs. And the principle is, so it's called unsupervised machine learning. And the idea is that if you get some data, so here it's two-dimensional data, so each square here corresponds to a data set with a value X and a value Y. So I don't know, it can be the wealth of people and their age, for instance, or whatever topic you're interested in, but you have 2 kinds of values for each data point. And so each data point, like here, has a value for X and for Y. So these are, of course, synthetic data sets. So you generate these data points, and you then you want to understand the structure of this data set. You are searching for clusters. And you can see that in some cases, it's very clear, like this line here, in this line, so the network is always the same. And you want to say, any way you see it, you want to say, I have 3 clusters. And these 3 clusters are this one, and this one. But here, what the column corresponds to clustering algorithm. So many clustering algorithms have been proposed by many different people. And you see that all of them, they agree, there is no ambiguity here, there are 3 clusters. And these 3 clusters are the one we expect. But then you can design some more tricky examples, like all of these ones. And so this one is more like, it's the same idea. We kind of clearly see that we have 3 clusters, probably, but they are fuzzy. The limits are not very clearly defined. So maybe you have to, for the algorithm, it will be difficult to decide how to cut them. But basically, everyone agrees that you have probably this one, and this one. So on this data set, for instance, you can say that this algorithm, probably you don't really agree with the result that you get. So it's not good on that kind of data. But then you see very different cases. Like, for instance, in this data set, of course, you as a human, when you see it, you say, yeah, I think this solution is probably very good because I have the blue one, which is clearly like some structure of the data. And then there is the orange one, which is something different. So it makes sense to you. But if you think again in terms of that each data point is just an X and a Y, then you realize that this point and this point, okay, they agree on X, but they are completely different on Y. On Y, they are actually the most opposite of all the points in the data sets. So why put them together? Well, you put them together because you see the global picture, but the kind of data of algorithm that do this, they don't want to put this point and this point together because they are very, very far. So that's why some methods like this one or this one, they will kind of cut your data set to put only, what is only important to them is that the points that are close in the space, they should be together in the same cluster. So you see that there is not one right answer in that case. It's more, well, you're capturing something about the organization of the points in your data set. And yeah, it's true for the other ones. In every case, so sometimes it's very clear that you don't agree with the result of the algorithm, like also this one or this one. It seems really weird for you. And some cases, you understand why it does it, and maybe it's also capturing something relevant. And then there is this the line on the bottom, which is a different case, because in that case it's just random points. So you just give random points. There is no structure. There is nothing. And then the algorithm they propose some way to cluster them. So some algorithm require that you give the number of clusters. So obviously, in that case, it will cluster. But some others, you see, you don't give the number of clusters, and they manage by themselves to find how many clusters there are. And in that case, they tell you, well, I think there is no cluster here. It's just randomness. And this is probably like the most meaningful answer if you really want to understand how your data is organized. But also, clearly, you see that maybe this solution makes sense. If you really want 3 clusters, well, the best is to put the one which are the most similar together. Okay, so this is not on graphs, it's clustering, but it's really exactly the same thing for graphs. Maybe in some cases, and actually some of these algorithms, they are actually based on graphs. So the first thing they do is to say, if 2 points are close together in this space, I will put an edge between them, and then I will do some kind of community detection on it. And actually, these methods can give this kind of result, because you see that if you do this mechanism on with a graph, then you will put edges between all of these ones, and you don't have any edge between the blue and the orange. So when you will try to find communities, you will find the blue one and the orange one. So actually, because working with graphs is fast, some of these methods for clustering are actually based on first transforming into a graph and then finding communities in it. Okay, so on when you apply the modularity method on a network, on a random network, you have exactly the problem I was mentioning before. So this is an adjacency matrix. So each small dot here corresponds to one edge between node 100 and node 100. So you have your adjacency matrix. And if you apply some community detection using Louvain, and then you reorder your nodes in the adjacency matrix according to the communities you have found. So you see these dark blocks. So these dark blocks means that it's dark because there are more edges in it. So it means that it's a dense area of the network. So if I show you this matrix with these dense blocks, you will say, yeah, these are good communities. So maybe you don't see it as darker in the, yeah, it's more clear in the original picture, but believe me, you can see some blocks here. And so you tend to say, yeah, the modularity has found some blocks which are meaningful because they appear as dark square here. But actually, it's just some noise in the data because you have a random graph at the beginning. So if it's random, there is no structure. And this is just that you put some of them that were a little bit more dense by chance, you put them together and you see this structure, but it doesn't capture anything real into the data. Although it will have a modularity which is above 0. So you will believe that there is some community structure, although there isn't actually in reality.
So it means that if you have a random graph, you shouldn't detect any community in that graph. It's one of our goals or one of our preference that if there is a random graph, you don't want to capture anything.
Well, as I said, it's a notion of it depends what you want. So if you have random points here, do you want to find 4 clusters or do you want to find 0? It depends what you want to do. Here, it's also the same thing. But in theory, if you think about it, and I give you just a random graph, and I ask you, is it organized in communities? Clearly, you should answer no. It's not organized in community. It was just a random graph. So if the algorithm answer yes, look, there are 4 communities. This one, this one, this one, and this one. You can maybe use it if you want, I don't know, like to isolate, let's say that you have a global pandemic, for instance, and you want to isolate a group of people. Maybe you want to find the group of people who are in fact the most connected, even if it's for random reasons. Maybe it can be useful anyway to find this group of strongly connected people and to make them more separate. So it's easier to separate them from the rest, and you get groups which are, and the propagation cannot go from one block to another. So maybe you can find some way to use it. Why not? But if I ask you, are there blocks in this network, and this network is random, I expect you rather to answer no, there are no blocks. So that's probably a weakness of the modularity. Well, it's considered a weakness of the modularity is that it always tells you, even in a random network, it tells you, yes, there are communities, here are the communities, although originally it was random. So modularity has other kind of weaknesses or controversial properties if you think about how it works. One thing is that it's a global measure. So this means that a difference in one side of the network can change community on the other one. So if I show you a network, and clearly the algorithm of Louvain will tell you, okay, there are 3 communities. Let's say there are 3 communities. But now I tell you, okay, actually this was just one part of the network, and here is the rest of the network. And the fact that you know the rest of the network will change what you decide are communities in the first part I've shown you. You can see it clearly with the ring click, because with this ring click, if it's small, each click here is one community. But if I increase it, so if I add clicks at the other end of the ring, I just add new clicks in the ring here, and after some times it will lead to these 2 merging together into a single community, which seems kind of maybe strange because you have just modified something in the other end of the network and it's changed your community structure in the other part. But it's normal because it's defined as a global score to optimize, as a global quality function to optimize. So these limits are known and you need to be aware of them. But to this day, Louvain and the modularity, notion of modularity, remain the most used method clearly in the literature. And when I say in the literature, these methods, so the Louvain method is used in a lot of fields. Actually, nowadays it's used to analyze in neuroscience. It's used in ecology. It's used in many different fields. And actually, you can see it if you look here. I just extracted from Google Scholar. So I don't know if you can see it well, but it's just some bars going up like this. And sorry. And this is the number of citations of the paper which introduced the Louvain method in Google Scholar. So what you can see is that it's still increasing. So here it's 2021, and it's like 2,000 citations per year now. So it's really something. It's one of the most highly cited papers that you have right now, and its popularity is increasing very fast. I mean, in a very large way, because it's used in many different disciplines. Because it's, you know, it's when you use Gephi, for instance, and you click on community detection, well, it uses Louvain. So basically, people who don't know maybe how to use other tools, they use Gephi, they run the algorithm, and then they interpret the result, and they say it was done with Louvain, so you get one more citation, and so on and so forth. So there is no ambiguity that this paper and this method is clearly still the most used in the literature. But you have to know the limits. And I think Christophe also introduced this method in which you can change the resolution. So I reintroduce it here because you can use it later. You will, in the experiments, I ask you to use it. It's very simple. The idea is just that you introduce some resolution parameter to be able to tune kind of the size of communities. So you can choose a value, and with this value, if it's 1, you get normal modularity. And if you change it, it will tend to find larger communities or smaller communities. So you can kind of tune the level, the size of the communities that you're searching for. Okay. I will then introduce a few other methods, which I think are very interesting, that solves kind of some of these problems. So the first one is the InfoMap method, and the second one is Bayesian inference of stochastic block models. I will just introduce them roughly, but that you get the ideas. And I think I want to introduce these methods because they have a clear definition of what are communities. They are theoretically grounded because there are actually thousands of papers published proposing methods for community detection. It's like one of the most studied topics in every conference. So the conference which is going on right now, you certainly have at least 10 papers proposing new methods for community detection. But the thing is that many of them kind of propose some empirical way to improve on the Louvain method, and you don't exactly know what you get. Maybe you get it a little bit faster, maybe you solve some problems, maybe you have a different ID based on agent-based modeling, or like consensus, or you reapply some clustering method on normal data on graphs. You have different approaches, but what I like in these ones is that they are very uninterpretable way to understand what your communities are, and they are also very, very famous. They are among the most used methods, and yeah, very popular. Yeah.
For these alternative methods, again, the similar question as I asked previous sessions. Do we have anything related to graph neural networks that, for example, use the embedding to cluster detect one. For example, we give the graph, and then based on the proximity of the embeddings, plus the next.
Yes, the question was about are there some machine learning methods to do, especially based on graph embedding, something I will introduce at the end. So yes, the principle of graph embedding is that you take a graph and to each node you attribute a vector which corresponds to its position in the network, like the structure capturing the structure of the network. And yes, when you get that, you get exactly what I had on the picture on this picture. You can use any of the clustering method on any of the embedding that you obtain for a network. So that is one approach to do that, the popular approach. Yes, there are. That's in the last conferences, there were at least 5 papers doing that every year. Yes, because it's a clear idea. So yeah, so the InfoMap method, the idea is to find the partition minimizing the description of a random walk on the network. So we want to compress, so it's based on information theory, and you want to compress random walk. So what does it mean? So you have here a network, and this kind of spaghetti here corresponds to a random walk. So you start on this node, then you choose randomly a neighbor, you go to this one, then you choose randomly a neighbor, well, you go to this one, then this one, and you continue, and you follow your line like this, and you continue for eternity to move randomly on your network. And the idea is that if I want to describe this random walk, so I just need to give the index of the node you have been to. So you give some index. So you call the first node 0001 using binary notation. Then the second one 0010. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 with just a number. And you count like this the number of bits that you need to describe your random walk. So this is known to be the most efficient way. If you just don't have any information, you have to give this binary notation for all the nodes, and this describes unambiguously the walk. So you see that I start on, so the code of this node is 111111000. So it corresponds to, it's what's written here. And then you move to node 1100. So here you write 1100, and so on and so forth. You continue, you write the list of all the nodes you go for. At the end, you have a sequence of 1 and 0, so a number of bits. And this gives you for, you can say, because it's infinite and random. So you know that the number, you cannot know it for, so basically the description length is just the number of the length of your walk multiplied by the number of bits that you need to identify one node. So this gives you the number of bits that you need to encode a random walk. But then the idea was that what we know about communities is that they are dense inside and they are sparse between them. So you have a good probability to stay inside the community and a low probability to move from one community to another. Okay, many edges inside red, a low probability to go from red to orange. So the idea is to, instead of coding every time the full length of the node, what you will do is that you will code the community you start in. Then you will code, you will have a unique number, a unique identifier for each node, which is internal to the community. So you can have the same ID of node between two different communities, like 111, it's this node, but it's also this one. Because before you said, I'm in orange. So if I'm in orange, 111 means this node. If I'm in green, 111 means that node. And so in the description, what you do is that you start with the ID here of the community. So 111 here. And when you have to change the community, like here, for instance, you move and you put the ID of the orange one. So when you see this 0, you know that in the list description, you know that this means I'm moving to orange. So you see that it's very short in that case because you have very few communities here. So you need a very short description to describe when you're moving from a community to another. And so now that what you check is that if you do this random walk and you code it that way, then you see here that the description is shorter. So if you look at the number of bits in this black area and the number of bits in that area, you see that this one is shorter. This means that you're using this description in communities, you are able to compress the description length of your random walk. You're able to compress it. And if you're able to compress it, there is a result in information theory which tells you that if you're able to compress it, it means that it's not random and you are able to capture something real about the data. If your network is random, then you cannot compress it. You cannot compress it with any way, and not even using some trick like this on designing communities and finding some nice way to identify the nodes or whatever. If it's random, you cannot compress it. That's really yeah. So basically, the idea now you see the answer to the problem we had with the modularity. It's that with this approach, you can check if your network is random or not. If it's random, you cannot compress it. If it's not random, you can compress it. Well, maybe depends on the approach you use, but if it has a community structure, with this, you will be able to compress it. And the more you will be able to compress it, the stronger the community structure. So in the details, they use just Huffman coding to assign what is known, although by demonstration, that this is the most efficient coding that you can have. And yeah, they use prefix-free. Again, it's just some tricks to get the most efficient as possible way to encode your nodes. Yes.
I'm not sure to have clear in mind how do you batch your communities if the algorithm is infinite.
How do you find the communities?
How do you find? Yeah, if we had to specify before, or if the algorithm finds the communities. And
so that's I think. What I have here, if it's the right answer. So basically, the principle is that this just defines you a quality function for your partition. Basically, it's the gain. Well, the encoding cost is like the modularity. The modularity gives you a score for a partition, and this gives you a score for a partition. It gives you the cost to encode, and so then you can use. Actually, in the first version, they were using some. How is it called? Simulated annealing methods to do that, but it was not very fast. So in a second paper, they changed to use something very similar to Louvain, actually. So they use a Louvain method, very similar. They check among the neighbors, if I change it in your community, how does it change this description length? And if it decreases the description length, then it's the best solution, and I do it. So kind of a Louvain-like method. Yes.
I don't understand how the random walk can be a quality checker for the community partitioning, because I don't think is our goal to build larger and larger communities such that we can have such that we can have smaller description for each node in communities. Or
well, what is good with this approach is that like with modularity, you cannot have a naive solution, because if you do a single community, then it means that you go back to these cases, because you after saying that you're in that community, for each node you need to have a very long description. So if you do a single community, the description of the node become long. And if you do every node in its own community, for instance, you could imagine that, So exactly in that case, the description of which node you are in that community is very simple. It's just one, you don't even need a bit. But the problem is that in that case, for each community, you will need a description which is exactly as long as in the original network.
That's where my problem is. How do we use the length of the random walk description actually? How are we sure the fact that the length is actually correct, since we don't actually know whether we need big communities or small communities when we start the.
So that's really you don't say it beforehand. It's really that if you have the right size of community, your description length will be minimal. So you try to minimize this description length, and to do that, you try to merge and to divide communities exactly like with the Louvain algorithm. You try to move them around, and you count how many bits you gain. So what is maybe okay? What I missed maybe here is that it's on the next slide. This in that case, I've put some numbers on the nodes, but in reality, you don't do actually random walks, and you don't give actual numbers to nodes. All this is theoretical, because as you do an infinite random walk, given the network and given the partition, you can compute directly the number of bits that you need to encode the random walk. So you don't need to do the process itself. You can just compute it. So using this formula, actually, in which you will know the number of bits. So this will encode. This is the probability. So it's so this is the description length of the partition is defined by counting on that side the number of bits that you need to describe move between communities, and this one is describing the number of bits that you need to describe hops inside the communities. And so basically this is for each of the, so they call it M for modules, but it's like communities. And this is the probability of within module movements. So this is just decided by the number of edges that you have. So the probability that you have to move between them, because they all have the same probability. So probability of within module movements. And here you have the cost of movements inside the module, which also depends on the number of nodes that you have inside the module. So if you know how many nodes you have, you know how many bits you need to encode one node. So if you know the number of nodes, you know how many bits you need to encode one node, and you know the probability to move within the module. And this one gives you, so in the same way, the probability of move between the modules. So the more edges you have in between the module, the more it will increase that. And here you have the cost of the movement between the modules. And again, this gives you, it depends on the number of modules. If you have many modules, to identify one module, you need a large number. If you have a few modules, you need a small number. So when you will increase the number of communities, number of modules, it will increase that part. And on the contrary, it will increase that part. And so you have this trade-off. And when you will increase the number of communities, you will gain on one side and lose on the other one, and the opposite. And so the problem is just to optimize this quality function by any method you want. And basically, the Louvain one is known as a good one, where you're just moving your nodes around. It's a greedy approach, which goes fast to a good solution. Okay, so I don't go into the details. If you're not familiar with information theory, you can just remember the general idea and on this. Otherwise, we can check the details, of course. And the paper is really well done even with figures. They have like an online website in which you can play to really get the sense of how it works and how the formula works. So yeah, how does the algorithm work in the end? So you compute the fraction of time each node is visited by the random walker. And then you explore the space of possible partition, as I said, with some greedy approach usually now in the current implementation. And then, yeah, they try to refine it to try to, so you don't see it, but anyway, you just use an algorithm to try to minimize this description length. Okay, so that's why, to sum up, InfoMap defines a quality function for a partition, which is different than modularity. Any algorithm can be used to optimize it, as I said, like a Louvain one. A big advantage is that InfoMap can recognize random networks, so there are no communities. And in practice, it gives really good results, and it's fast. It's approximately as fast as Louvain. So it's really a good. I always, sometimes if I want to find communities in a network, I always used Louvain and InfoMap, and sometimes it gives a different perspective. Okay, any question on that? Yeah. If you have a question later, you can ask.
Yeah, it's like, since we need to minimize the work length, how it means that we're going to do that with many iterations, I think. And how do we change the how do we change the communities? How do we adjust the communities using the result the result that we got for the random walk from the iteration before?
So that's maybe, yeah, that's what I was maybe, I'm not sure if I understand. That's what I was trying to say here, is that actually to really do when you do your community detection, you never do a single random walk, right? You don't do them. You just compute. If you are doing an infinite random walk, which is impossible anyway, but if you are doing an infinite random walk, you know the cost, how much it will cost you to encode it, to encode one hop of this random walk, and you know it because you know the fraction of time each node is visited by the random walker. You just know it by looking at the network beforehand. You know the probability to go from each node to each other node. It's just the probability, just based on the number of neighbors that you have from it. So you don't really do the random walks. You just compute it by a formula, the cost that it will have to do this random walk. Okay, so it just gives you a quality function like the modularity, and it's also something that you can just update locally. So if you just do one switch from one node, from one community to another one, this will tell you that in average now a random walk costs 0.001 bits more. Every hop will cost you 0.001 bits more. Okay, so this is really to understand, because mechanism that behind is really this one, but in reality you don't need to do the random walk. Okay. Okay, now about the second approach. I will maybe go a little bit faster on that. The stochastic block model approach, which is based on statistical models. What is very interesting is that it's a model which is more general than the communities we have seen until now. Because each node belongs to one and only one community, but for each pair of community, there is an associated density. And maybe I will go to this picture to help you understand what I mean. So this one here is the community structure we have seen until now. So we have a network, we have 4 groups. And if you look at the matrix, how it looks like, so in this matrix, you have colors corresponding to the colors here. So you have all the red nodes, they are here, all the orange nodes, they are here, all the green ones here, all the blue one here. And on the intersection between red and red, you have something dark, which means a large number. And same for yellow and yellow, green and green, and blue and blue. The values on the diagonal are large. So this tells you that it's an assortative or modular organization. An organization in community, as we discussed it until now. You have groups. These groups are strongly connected, and there are few connections between blocks. But this is not the only thing that could exist. You have on the bottom what is called a periphery organization, core periphery organization, which briefly discussed in the first class, in which you have a core which is strongly connected, and then you have a periphery which is very weakly connected to itself and more strongly connected to the center. And this corresponds to this organization. So you have a very dark square here corresponding to red. You have something a little bit less dark, which corresponds to all the other blocks, blue, orange, and green, connected to red. And then you have some nearly white area here, which is the links between the orange and yellow and blue, yellow and green, blue and green, and so on and so forth. So you see that here we have blocks. We have connections between these blocks which are not random, but it's not simply if you're yellow, you're connected to a yellow. No, if you're yellow, you're strongly connected with a high probability with a red. If you're green, you also with a high probability connected to a red. And if you're a blue, you're not connected with high probability to a blue node. And you can also imagine, for instance, something like that, which is disassortative. So in which the diagonal is very close to be white, which means that if you're red, you have you have a very small probability to be connected to a red. It's disassortative. You don't want to connect with people from the same block. And this corresponds to a different organization. It doesn't mean, so it means that you don't have communities in the sense that we discussed before, but it means that you have a very strong organization. In that case, it's very clear. The red node, they are specially connected to the yellow one. The red, I like the yellow one. But also the orange, they are strongly connected to the green. But the green, in that case, they are not connected with the green. That's how it is organized, and it can correspond to a real structure. I don't know, for instance, so it's not with blocks, but with age. We will see it later, but for instance, if you look at the social structure of people, we have seen on Facebook that people tend to be friends with people from the same age, but there is also a very strong link between people who have about 25 years of difference. Well, it makes sense, it's parents and child. So even if you have different properties, you can be strongly connected. And then you can imagine something even more generic, in which you have just some mixed organization. So in this case, it just means that between any pair of blocks, for some reason, there is a strong connection. So in that case, there is a very strong connection between blue and blue. So maybe blue is associative. And then the second one is between orange and blue, but then you have also strong connection between orange and green, and so on and so forth. So you can imagine that you have blocks, and these blocks, they characterize how your network is organized, but it's not necessarily associative. And you see that this is interesting because being able to represent any block preference is powerful and potentially relevant. There are real cases in which it makes sense. So the problem is that it's often hard to interpret in real situations. So sometimes the stochastic block models, they are constrained. So we say that we want that the internal density is stronger than the density in between them, so that we get associative blocks. But what is interesting is that you can nevertheless detect blocks which are not associative. So the problem is how to find those blocks, because we see that the problem is more complicated. Now you want to find something which is more general. So in the old approach, you need to specify the design number of clusters. So you define your number of clusters beforehand. You say, I want 4 clusters. And then you will find some parameters to optimize the likelihood of generating a graph according to this number of blocks. So that's what I described here. To describe a block model, you need to define the number of blocks. So you need to define to which block each node belongs. So in my example before, it was, is it red or blue or whatever. So the belonging of the node to the block. And then E, which is a k by k, so the number of blocks, stochastic block matrix. So this tells you, this block matrix, it tells you how many edges you have between two blocks, or what is the probability to observe an edge between two blocks. And so when I said before that what you want is to optimize the parameters of the model to optimize the likelihood, these are the parameters. So usually you fix k, and then you want to change B. So B means the affiliation of node to communities, so find the cluster. And you want to also optimize your E, knowing that the two are actually strongly connected. They are connected by a relation 1-1, because if for a specific graph and a specific partition, you know the stochastic block matrix, you know how many edges there are between each pair of blocks. So in the end, what you want to find is B. So the idea of just to explore the space of all the partitions, that will maximize the likelihood to generate the graph that you have observed according to this model, which is the stochastic block model with the K, B, and E that you have chosen. So I don't go maybe into the details because I want to do the evaluation part. But in 2016 there was this author that wrote a new paper which is based on description length, in which he tried to solve the problem of assigning the number of blocks. So he found a way that you don't have to decide beforehand the number of blocks. And the idea very generally is to encode both things. So you encode the cost of the model. So you go back to the number of bits that you need to encode your description of the graph, number of bits that you need. But in that time, it's not the number of bits that you need to encode a random walk, but just the number of bits that you need to encode the model. And what it says is that you have S, which is the number of bits necessary to encode the graph knowing the model, and L, which is the number of bits necessary to encode the model. Basically, the idea here about the model is that if you have a lot of blocks, you have a complex model. You need to describe, you will have a large matrix to describe all the connection between all the blocks. So the cost of encoding your model will go up. But if you have a lot of blocks, for instance, if you put each node in its own block, then you can generate a single graph. If you have every node in its own block, then you can have a single graph. So you don't need, so the cost of encoding the graph knowing the model is very short. And on the contrary, if you make a few number of blocks, then the model will be not costly, but knowing that model will be close to generate a random graph. And so if you just generate random graph, to encode the particular graph that you have observed, you will need to give a lot of information more to say, I have this random graph, but I also need to like change this node and this edge and this edge and this edge so that I get exactly my graph that I have observed. So it's a little bit the same idea as before. You need to find a good solution which makes the model not too complicated, and which gives a model which, nevertheless, even though it's not too complicated, it generates graph that looks like the one that you have observed. That's the general idea. And this is, so for those who know about it, it's really this idea of the Occam's razor, that basically when you have two equivalent solutions, the best one to explain is the simpler one. And that's here this idea of having a simple model. You want a simple model that explains well your observed graph. So again, not going into too much details here, but again, they have like this guy has written like 10 papers on this, in which he proposed different variation. There is even like a class, and you have the references in the cheat sheets that I provide, if you want to go into the details. So to sum up, stochastic block model have a convincing definition of communities with this notion of not only communities but blocks with that in which you can control finally the blocks structure. The problem is that usually in practice it's still a little bit slower than Louvain and InfoMap due to the complexity of the algorithm of the computation of the quality function. But it's more powerful in the sense that you can represent more cases, not only. Yeah. It can also say if there is no community, like InfoMap. If your network is random, you cannot compress it using this approach. And it has been shown that it also suffers from some sort of resolution limit, and this is also true for InfoMap. So people have shown that nevertheless they can have a preferred community size, block size in the network. So they are not perfect, but yeah, nothing is perfect in life, in science usually. So less often used, but regained popularity in multiple-based auto. So yes, it was something that existed for a long time, but now it's quite popular. Even though that's something which is more used only by people in statistics and statistical physics, but less by other researchers which prefer the InfoMap and Louvain approaches. But it's changed. So I don't know in the future which one will be the most used. And also, so this guy, he also wrote a library, a Python library. Well, it's a C library and Python library, in which you can use in a few lines of code, you can do this inference and use this method on your networks. So yeah, so any question on that? So just a few words about the evaluation, because the point is that we intuitively, we have seen that knowing what a good community is difficult. But nevertheless, we want sometimes to know if some method gives some good communities. And so to evaluate the quality of the community that you find, you can use basically two approaches. One is to do intrinsic evaluation. So intrinsic evaluation means computing some quality function on your partition. So you can use the modularity, you can use the graph compression score, you can use whatever. So you get a score about the quality of your partition. But the problem, of course, is that well, if you like the modularity, if you agree with it, you will use this score. If you use another, well, it doesn't tell you more that what you. But for instance, if your modularity is 0, then it means that you don't have good community function. So that's a way to evaluate nevertheless. And then you can just also compute some more intuitive things, like for instance, the conductance, in which you will compute the number of edges for one community. You will compute the number of edges going out, and you will divide by the total number of edges going in or out. So basically, this tells you if this community is well separated from the rest of the graph or not. If it's a large community with few edges inside, it's a good community. If it has few edges inside and many outside, then probably it's not a good community. So you can define things like this, or even the internal clustering coefficient. You remember, so this will tell you if inside your communities you have a lot of triangles. Maybe if you have a lot of triangles, you will consider it's a good community. So this is a way to compute the quality of communities. But yeah, again, it depends on what you want. But why are you searching communities in the first hand? Might say which method you use. And the other approach is to compare with the ground truth, because as we have seen, sometimes we know what we want to find. So when we see these three groups of dots, we know that we want to find these three groups of nodes. So the idea is to generate networks like that. So you can generate with stochastic block models in which you put yourself the properties, not based on a real network. Or you can use another generator, which is called the LFR benchmark, which makes graphs which are more realistic, because you just need to define the power law distribution of degrees of node, the average degree, the average community size, and a mixing parameters, which tells you how strongly is the community structure. So if you put it at 0, you have only clicks without connection between them. If you put it at 1, you have a random network, and between the two, you have a network which is with a community structure which is more or less well clearly defined. It generates network like this. So you see, if you have a value of a mixing of 0.1, you get a very clear community structure. If you put it at 0.5, sorry, you see that you already have a graph that you cannot simply plot with a clear community structure. And if it's 0.3, well, you have something which is not that clear, but we're very still a community structure. Anyway, it depends also on the size of the network. But yeah, so you get networks like this, which are more realistic than with the block model. And then when you have this, yeah, and you can also use another thing, which is to use real network. So you take a real network with ground truth. So for instance, you have a social network like on Facebook or Friendster or Orkut, where you know that people are in groups, like the people who like movies, or people who are from Lyon, or people who, I don't know, whatever. And you consider that this should be communities. This is a ground truth. And you will try to check if your community detection algorithm finds communities that look like this ground truth. If it's the case, then you're happy and you say that it's a good algorithm. So one piece is still missing. How to say if two partitions are similar or not. Like you have your real partition. You know that these groups of people are in the same block in a generated network. Or you know that they like the same movie, for instance, in the social network. And you want to compare. So you can use basically two measures, which are the normalized mutual information, or or a version which is adjusted for chance, which is more used recently. So again, I don't have really the time to go into the details, but yeah. So just to show you the kind of experiments which are done to then evaluate the quality of algorithm. So each line here corresponds to one method. So no, sorry, each square corresponds to one method. So Blondel, here, and Al is actually the Louvain method. It's a Louvain method, and here you vary the quality, the well-definedness of communities. So for 0, you have communities which are extremely well-defined. And then at 0.8, you have communities which are very hard to see in the network. And the lines correspond to different size of communities and graphs. And you compute this normalized mutual information, this NMI, between the generated network and the partition found by the algorithm. So you check that you have discovered the blocks that you were searching for. And you see that, so for instance, this method works well because until 0.4, you have a score which is nearly 1. You find exactly what you were expecting. But you see that some other methods, they kind of fail more quickly. Yeah, and you have different results. So here you see why people use Louvain. It's because it kind of have very good scores on this kind of tests. And then FOMAP also here. And yeah, so this is a way to test that if you put you generate some network, you know that you have a community structure in it, and you check that your method, the method finds these blocks, then you know it's rather a good method. Of course, one problem is that these networks are not very realistic because they are generated networks. They are not as complex as real networks. And then some people also like go further and study this. For instance, these people have done a community detection on a network of community detection algorithm. So it's kind of a meta-analysis. So each dot here corresponds to each node correspond to one method. And they checked if the results of this method are similar. And so they tell you that there is like a family of method here that finds some kind of community structure. There is another family here, another family here, another family here. And so maybe if you want to find communities in a network, you're better. What you could do is to try at least one of each of the 4 categories, and maybe you will have 4 different visions of the communities, of the organization of your graph.
How do they feed the graph? I mean, for example, how do they add page between 2 methods or
yeah. So basically, I don't remember the details, but the general idea is that they generate networks, or they take networks, whatever. I think this group, well, they have like 100 real networks. They find communities according to each of the methods, and then they compute the similarity between the results. So they say, okay, this one, this method, and this method, they find approximately the same group. There is a correspondence, for instance, with the NMI score of, in average, 0.8 between them. So you will put an edge with a strength of 0.8. And maybe this method and this method, they have really a strong disagreement. They have a disagreement of, I don't know, the score of NMI is 0.2 only. So you don't put an edge between them. So you see, they give you the same kind of answer.
Meaningful interpretation regarding these graphs. For example, they say that okay, what do these methods capture as a community or something like that? For example, they say that okay, the red box captures, for example, friendship as a community or common interest in a social network as a community. Do they have anything like that?
So there are other papers where they do that. So it's not as simple as saying they capture a friendship or something like that. But yeah, I think even in this paper they do some analysis. I don't remember well the results, but I think, for instance, here this one is kind of a zoom on the overlapping methods. So obviously the overlapping methods, they have results which are different from the other ones because they allow nodes to be overlapping, to belong to several communities. And I think they also like make a big difference between all these methods which are based on spectral graph analysis, and the ones which are more like agglomerative and based on the betweenness. So it really gives you different types of structures. And maybe also the stochastic, the block model also is maybe someone else. I don't remember this, but yeah, I don't remember the details. But there is a reference to the paper if you're interested, and it's also a paper which is very easy to read. A few words about other types of mesoscale organization, because I introduced the communities, the blocks, which are a little bit more general. But actually, you can have other types of organization of network. There is the core periphery. I already explained it, but yeah, so I should explain it. There are overlapping communities, already explained. One node belongs to several communities. And I think Christophe also said a few words about that. Here is an example of an algorithm, but I don't have time to explain it, but it's okay. Hierarchical communities like in Louvain. But here it's a picture for stochastic block models. So you can also do hierarchical blocks model like this. So the idea is that you have like 3 communities, the gray one. And in each community, you say that you have communities inside. And maybe you can even go one level deeper and see that you have communities inside communities and so on and so forth. For instance, I don't know, you can say that if you study interaction between people, you will have one large block by country, because people from the same country tend to discuss together. Maybe at a higher level, you even have language. So you have people who speak English and people who speak Chinese. Maybe they don't have, they are blocks. Inside English, you probably have Australia, England, and the US, and Yeah, and South Africa, which are blocks, different blocks. And then if you go into one of these countries, probably you find even more differences. So if you zoom into the US, you probably have the East Coast and the West Coast. And if you go to the East Coast, you probably have, and so on and so forth. So you clearly see that this has a hierarchical organization. And another type of organization is the nestedness, in which the idea is kind of similar to the core periphery, but without blocks of core. And you more have like also some popular people who are connected to everyone. And this kind of decrease with the position of the node. So. And that's all for today's class. So there is, of course, the practicals. As usual, you will play with communities. And just one thing is that I added in the exams, in the exam at the end, you have a page describing the project. So you can go there, you have a description of what I asked for the project. So you can look at it now if you want and ask questions. There are some specificities for students from the complex system option and for the computer science informatics fundamental option. So I ask a little bit different things. If you're from cognitive science, there is none of them. You don't have any of these two obligations. You can do whatever you want compared to the rest. And what I will request is that you send me either on Discord or by email your groups as fast as possible, again, so that I know the number of groups. And you should be careful that you cannot walk between students from complex system and computer science. So if you're in computer science and complex system, you have to choose your side, but it should be computer science rather, because I actually, yeah, I don't really care which one, maybe, but maybe as you want. Yeah, so send me the groups when you know with who you're working. You tell me. Sorry? Yeah, groups of 2 or 3. Yes. Yes, it's also in group of 2 or 3, so you can reuse the same one. It's probably the best for me. But if you want to do a different, it's fine. And you can have a short break if you want now, and then go back to the experiments.